By way of introduction, my name is Tom Breckles. I am one of the managing partners and principals, one of three, along with Ryan and Ron Boyko of ICS Facility Services. We are a national service provider that services some of Canada's top real estate management groups and owners, industrial, commercial, institutional, and multi-res. As Steve Jobs said, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are those that do. At ICS, I know we believe we're those people. We don't see the world like maybe some of the other groups do. We look out of the box constantly every day. It's part of our culture, and we try to make that permeate within our organization. We like to do things differently, to be relentless with innovation, sudden service, uncompromised compliance, to ensure that our clients receive operational excellence through risk mitigation, cost savings, and sustainability. Today we will hear about best practices as it relates to customer experience, innovation, emergency response preparedness, service delivery, and stakeholder alignment. We are truly honored to have such an accomplished group of industry experts share their experiences and insights on best practices within the built environment. Next, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our generous sponsors. To our lead sponsors, our council, Blaney McMurtry, Leah Nebel, I don't know where you are, but thank you. Jones Delorier, Smith & Long, and to our event sponsors, TD Bank, Eddy Solutions, GT French, and the Wide Academy. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the efforts of our entire ICS team in making this seminar happen. Special thank yous to our Chief Communications Officer, Melanie Beach, who managed the minutia of everything it takes to make this actually happen, including all the little minutia bits, all of them. And to Neil Lathangue, who truly saw this as a major deal for us in our company, and how to guide it and structure that. So thank you, Neil. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and apparently to put something like this together, certainly what we've been through over the last 30 to 45 days, it does. It takes a village. Neil is our CCO, our Chief Commercial Officer. He's responsible for developing customer-centric strategies and diversifying our service offering. Neil's recognized as president of one of Canada's top 50 best managed companies in the Financial Post, and top 500 in revenue and profitability in the Globe and Mail Report on Business. Neil also executed Canada's largest merger in the facility services industry. In addition, he has the unique distinction of winning an International Toby Award for Best Managed Building globally, while VP of Property and Asset Management with a previous Canadian real estate company. Neil has been a BOMI lecturer for over 20 years and has multiple publications as an author in sustainability. He's also a certified coach practitioner who helps real estate management companies and their leaders formulate strategies to achieve excellence in the built environment. With that, I want to thank you for all attending. I think this is going to be a great session for everyone, and I'll turn it back over to Neil.
So I'm going to do some brief introductions to our panelists today. This is an extraordinary group. I think if you take a look at their experience on a personal level, the organizations that they represent, the organizations that they've most recently represented, you're looking at a team that's managed something in the range of $250 billion in real estate assets and 250 million square feet in real estate. So I'm going to start with introductions at the far end. So my colleague Allan Yearwood is with Colliers, Senior Vice President. So he's overseeing their day-to-day operations and management of the third-party management portfolio. Allan studied at the University of Toronto with a focus in accounting and finance. Next to him is Michael McCormick, Vice President of Canderel, based out of the GTA. Did his undergraduate degree at Bishop's, I think it was something along the lines of economics or finance, then went on to do a Cornell, Queen's University MBA. As such, he oversees the entire book of business, owned and third-party managed for Canderel in Toronto. He has an MBA, a CPG, a CA, and an FRIE. So, if my point is that if you're feeling a little stressed out going into the holiday season, I'm pretty sure Michael can prescribe something for you. And I think we fall within the law. Next to Michael is Scott McBrayne. He's Senior National Operations Director with Cadillac Fairview, a big commercial office retail player. He's developed multiple centers of excellence for his department and his teams nationally. He develops best practices operationally for Cadillac Fairview on a national scale. And he did his undergraduate degree at Western and then went on to University of Fredericton to do his MBA. Mike Miceli, former chairman of BOMA Canada and former president of BOMA Toronto. Ryerson University, accounting and finance and computer studies, and then went on to York University to do a degree in business with a focus on real estate at York University. He's associate vice president and managing director of Manulife Financial Corporate Real Estate in Canada. So he's overseeing everything they own and manage, as well as their leased facilities and properties in the country. The gentleman on my immediate left, Neil Lacheur, graduated with a degree in economics from the University of Victoria. Up until Monday,
Friday.
Neil had a career with Quadrille Real Estate. So, we had all of our marketing material out, and Melanie did a terrific job with the social media campaign. And meanwhile, Neil was sitting on a piece of news that we didn't find out until later on. So, but congratulations to Neil. He's now running as executive vice president. He's running the platform. He's running the fee management and the agency practice for Avis & Young in Canada. Terrific mandate. So we'll have to watch and see what happens with Avis & Young over the coming years. Yes, these two are competitors.
That's why they put us on opposite.
That's right, yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the architecture behind this session. So one of the things we wanted to focus on was best practices and strategies that would allow you to qualify and pursue awards within the Canadian real estate, Canadian property management industry. So for example, if you want to go after a local GTA or a Canadian National TOBY, the Office Building of the Year Award, or an International TOBY, you're having to meet approximately 24 criteria. Everything from taxation to life safety, sustainability, building operations, tenant community satisfaction, sustainability, and so on. So what we decided to do was focus on 10 to 12 of those today. And each participant, each panelist is going to get an opportunity to really share their secret sauce, what their companies have done, and what they've done on a personal level in pursuit of best practices. Really, globally, the investment management industry as it relates to real estate is valued at approximately $9 trillion. And really developing best practices is really about the pursuit of excellence. In the absence of that as a culture or as an organizational strategy, a lot of companies are simply satisfied with the minimum regulatory requirements in the jurisdictions in which they own and manage and operate. Best practices is really about putting a team together and exploring how to develop what you do and the best ways in which to do it. And along the way, hopefully you've built a moat around your competitive advantage, and you're able to compete and thrive and grow as a real estate company. So having said that, I'm going to start off touching on tenant relations and communication and customer service. I'm going to ask Scott to lead us off, if he could, with a couple of his thoughts and his experience as it relates to developing best practices in that area.
First off, so from a customer service perspective, and over my 29 plus years career in real estate, customer service has evolved, tenant relations has evolved, and it's, today it's about the data. We need to understand how and what services our customers are looking for, how can we hopefully satisfy that need, and it transcends the basics of cleaning, janitorial, and other services. We're talking amenities, how we communicate, whether it's wireless through mobile app, it's a live phone or web portal, and then the feedback loop. So think about Uber or Lyft. When you get out of that car, you're immediately looking for feedback, or they're looking for immediate feedback on how is your service, rate your service. Similar thing has to happen in real estate. What was the service like? How can you deal with it? We tend to hear about the bad service or the incomplete service, but how do we actually measure the sentiment of our tenants, particularly in this extremely competitive environment when we want to retain those tenants? So how do we capture that data? How do we make it actionable? And how do we get the feedback loop for continuous improvement? And reality is today, and you've probably seen a lot out on the trade floor, that is driven through technology. We undertook this a couple of years ago, and we centralized a service center to really help us understand that data, as well as have consistent workflows. So some of our tenants sit in Vancouver, some sit in Toronto. Are they getting the similar type of service in those cities? So the way we can measure that really is around technology and those processes. So from my perspective, it's the data today that's king, and that is going to inform you what more you need to do, what are your areas and gaps of which that you can address program or have programs address those.
Scott, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about some of the key considerations that went into developing the areas where you wanted to focus and develop your best practices. So I'm going to assume that this was not done in isolation. You worked with a team, capable, competent, credible colleagues, coworkers. Can you comment at all on the significance of the team, how the team impacted the development of some of these best practices? How important was it for collaboration?
Yeah, I think for us, we had properties that were doing a great job in their building, and all these different service centers throughout the organization. When we looked at how can we centralize that talent and leverage that across the entire portfolio versus the haves and the have-nots, was our first strategy. And how can we collaborate from our general managers, from our property managers, from our operations managers on standardizing processes? This isn't something that's top down. This really is starting to figure out what's working well, and how can we share those across the organization.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to call on Michael Miceli if he could share something similar as it relates to tenant relations, communication, and customer service. And you're in a unique position, Michael. You've worked with some tremendous organizations. You're with Manulife Financial today. I know that you've managed some very significant portfolios. If you're able to draw on some of the best practices in those environments and share some of that with us.
Thank you. Well, within Manulife, we are also an insurance company. So we have, to piggyback on what Scott mentioned, we have a data analytics team, and that is all that they do for our company. And what we've done is we've taken that information and that talent pool and been able to bring that forward to not only our internal customer, which is Manulife in some cases, but also our third-party tenancies. As an example, one of the things we've done is the lighting system that you have in the building, if it's an LED system, that can track occupancy. And we use that data to give more information to our customers so that they understand which areas are underutilized, overutilized, and how they can manage their space. Within our company, it's even more important to us because we're looking at different ways of working. So a lot of that is through data analytics. But on the customer service, so I just wanted to share that because I think it's certainly an area that more and more owners are looking at how they can differentiate themselves from the competition. And I really think it's all about managing data, and I truly agree with Scott. So from a customer service perspective, I think it all starts at the team level. If you haven't hired for the right kind of individuals that understand customer service, it isn't something you can teach. We've tried it, and there are folks that are talented when it comes to operations, or talented when it comes to leasing, when it comes to property management, but they just don't get the customer service side of it. And unfortunately, you have to make those bold decisions, those difficult decisions in impacting the way the team operates, because it can influence and impact the way the team delivers their service if there are folks that aren't really buying into the program.
Yeah. So if we pull back on that a little bit, so you put on your former hat as chairman of BOMA Canada, BOMA Toronto. Can you comment, and then again, reconcile that against what you're doing now with your team with Manulife Financial? Talk to us a little bit about leadership and collaboration and communication with the key individuals who are developing the best practices.
Well, and a great point. We've got, as you know, even as Scott said, we've got different teams across North America, in fact, in Asia. And it's important to have that exchange of information, understanding best practices, working as a leader, being able to impart some of that information, some of that those differentiators that you can now use in each of your local settings, whether it's an office building, an industrial building, and applying that in that different environment. From a leadership perspective, it's really now a leader has to be more strategic. I know everyone keeps saying that, and I actually happened to attend a Disney Corporation presentation, and the way they become innovative, the way they do the things that they are able to achieve is everyone has to spend 15 to 20 minutes a day, just break away from what you're doing and kind of sit back and look at the world in a different way, look at your environment in a different way, come up with ideas, work with your team, work with your leadership team and your other team members, that you can now develop a new way of doing things. And it's really about that whole blue sky approach to things that gives, I believe, that ability to now use that information to become more in tune and in touch with your customers' needs.
You know, so just to paraphrase a little bit, I heard you talk a little bit about what's evolving as it relates to the industry and the different stakeholders. And, you know, in the past, it was a lot about policies and procedures and reporting, and that's changed. It's now sort of focusing around disruption, invigorating, innovation, and really, you know, to stay competitive. It really puts a different kind of spotlight on the need for organizations to collaborate and communicate effectively and cohesively. So I appreciate that. I'm going to jump over to Allan. So I'm going to ask Allan to comment or share with us some of your best practices, your experience as it relates to community impact.
So if anybody who knows me, I usually divert into all kinds of different topics during my discussion, but what Michael was saying and talking about and what Neil's saying about differentiation and disruption and innovation, I'm going to take a different sort of look at how we impact the community and how we actually do those things. At Colliers, we've actually worked a lot on our purpose, and we discovered a couple of things over the last few years to actually advance our platform and advance our people. And we discovered that a shared sense of purpose or cause or why was something that really became very vital to discover and figure out. And that's not an easy thing to do. If you ever try and figure out what your why is, it's a long process and try it, but I guarantee you if you read a book by Simon Sinek and actually try it out, and how we did it is we just started telling stories of things that we thought we were making an impact on the world or we were making things making a difference. So that was the one thing that we started down the road. The second thing, which really ties into what the gentleman is saying here about how do you share information, is trust is absolutely everything. Amongst the team, trust is everything. Because everything else after that, if you have a shared sense of purpose, you have a shared goal, a shared why, and then you have trust, all that sharing of information impacts what's going to go on. So this is the approach that we've been taking as a group, and this information and the data that's coming out of it, we're trying to create a psychological safe place for people to work and collaborate. And so I'm kind of stealing your question there. But that collaboration, that information, that sharing of ideas, that's where the creativity and the magic and innovation actually happens. You know, and then you can become strategic and you can do all those things. But we do believe it starts with why. And that's been a journey for us. We're continuing down that journey. How this actually is growing into what we do, let's talk about community impact, because that's the topic. When you ask a person what really is a passion of theirs, in an environment where they feel safe that they can talk about it, if they believe in raising money for cancer research, or they believe in Sick Kids Hospital, or they believe in health and wellness for their constituents in their building, our people from all levels are bringing those ideas to impact their community, to outreach to their neighbors, the residents in the area where their buildings that they're managing, the tenants, and the occupants. What are the passions and what do they know? And connecting those and reaching out. And that has been really powerful for our teams, to be able to come up with their own passion projects, bring it to their team and say, hey, I'd like to raise money for Habitat for Humanity, or do this or do that. This is an important item because they will see it through and they will make it even more successful than you could ever imagine. And that's how we've been able to impact the communities that we've been in. I'll give you one example where we manage a portfolio of assets on Yonge and St. Clair. I don't know if anybody's been up at the Yonge and St. Clair area recently, but there's been a lot of change there. Typically, Yonge and St. Clair was a 9 to 5 kind of node. People kind of went to work, went to the offices, and left for the day. We've been trying to change it around by reaching to the neighborhood. We actually created the Business Improvement Association for that node on behalf of our clients. And this gave us an opportunity to talk to the neighbors, talk to the local business associations, and come up and connect them together. You'd be surprised at how many local shop owners and businesses, they don't talk to each other. And the fact is that when they work together, that becomes a community. And that becomes something that you can find opportunities for improving business, improving the experience for the tenants and for the residents in the area. And finally, that just results into value add to those owners of those real estate. So it has a connection, and we've been able to find through our culture to try and achieve that. So,
Mike Miceli, I'm going to come back to you. Can you talk a little bit on community impact from a Manulife financial perspective?
And I think, again, as a company, that's important to us, but also so we're an insurance company with a real estate company embedded in it. So it kind of makes things a little, in fact, there are significant benefits, but there are also some complications that arise because of different regulatory things. But from a community perspective, we definitely have a very strong outreach program. From the roof of our building where we're introducing beehives to really embrace the community, and we take the honey and we give it to local businesses in the area to try fundraise for that, whether it's hospice in the area or a different association that we can form a partnership with. So that's a small way, but it also speaks to the environment, speaks to a lot of the different things that are really pinch points for people and important for them. So from a community perspective, we're trying to bring our assets and open the doors to the community. So whenever we have any kind of a program like many do, and I know across this table, there's the blood donor clinics and all the others, and typically they keep them within the population in the building. We open our doors and let the community in, and we advertise on that and make sure that they embrace us. We have a lot of public space that we allow them to use outside the building. We have activity areas that, again, the local community can participate in. We allow the guide dogs to come in and train in our building. So there are a lot of different things that we try to do where we connect and make that really strong bond with the community.
So as a culture then, I'm going to suggest that your financial bottom line is more than just profits. You're talking about a community-based financial institution, and when you sit down with your staff and you're doing performance reviews, or you yourself are being reviewed from a performance standpoint, they probably want to hear about what you have been doing from a community perspective. Correct. And how significant that's become.
Absolutely. And to your point there, one of the things we do as an organization is every employee has to do community work. That's part of the way we
I did as well,
ensure
but
that
I
they
did as well, but
connect.
for something else.
Yeah, I know what yours was, but it was 3 months later and you were able to get away from it. No, but it's, of course we're trying to sell a brand, but it's also recognizing that employees feel more like there is a sense of purpose beyond the four walls that you work within. So the folks do get to go out into the community. If they want, as Allan said, if they want to start working with the program, we give them the funds to be able to develop that within their community. If it's a sports program, if it's an arts program, if it is, again, the guide dogs are a big one that we've really embraced in a big way. So it's whatever the employees want to bring forward that they feel is something important to them. And in a lot of cases, it's a situation that's impacted their family, and they want to be able to fundraise on behalf of that. So these are some of the things that we bring, and Manulife helps, use its brand to help drive that.
Right. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about sustainability and get a few other touch points here. So I'm going to come to our friend Neil Lacheur and ask Neil to share with us some of the best practices, strategies. What have you been doing in the last 48 hours at Avis and Young to make a difference?
It's kind of been thought of typically as green, right? So it could be LEED, it could be energy efficiencies, all the things that go into becoming a more environmentally sound operating company. But the flip side of that is all the social stuff too that we've just talked about. And those are critical elements. It's ESG fundamentally associated with sustainability. And so the organizations are evolving quickly, I think, around that concept. We've kind of moved from BOMA Best and LEED to GRESB. For those that don't know GRESB, it's the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and I don't have the exact stats, but it's a worldwide organization that rates companies based on their sustainable practices. And that includes tenant communication, it includes community impact, it includes your energy and traditional sustainable operating practices. And they rate these companies from all over the world. I think this year there was $3 trillion, I might not get it exactly right, somewhere around $3 trillion worth of real estate assets lumped into this GRESB benchmarking. And you see how your organization does. And if you're a leader, if you're a follower, you're emerging, all that sort of stuff. And more and more companies are getting involved with that. Institutional investors are paying a lot of attention to that. And that really is the most balanced benchmarking or evaluation metric that we've seen. Quadrille, I'll talk about Quadrille. Being a new company, it was really important to be a participant in that, but before my time at Quadrille, Bethel Kennedy,
Right.
along with Oxford and
Yep.
the other really amazing Canadian operating companies are all participating in this, and I'd encourage companies to get involved. It's not a small amount of work, but it really provides a solid platform from which to measure yourself.
So in terms of the folks who are attending today, and it's really their session, it's not our session, I'm going to suggest that we don't have a room full of Canadian real estate giants. I'm going to suggest that not all of these folks are managing trophies. They're not managing A's. They may not even be managing B's.
That's my new world, by the way.
So what's a message? And others feel free to jump in, but specifically Neil, what does it say about a company if they don't have a sustainability strategy, a sustainability vision, or a mission statement, regardless of A, B, or C?
Well, I think...
Does it say anything?
First of all, yeah, I think it says a lot.
Okay.
I would suggest that there's two aspects of this. For everybody in the room, we work for companies, and there's a sustainability strategy associated with the organizations we work for, and then there's sustainability strategies around the properties that we manage. And so they really need to be separated out. And what's the organization that you work for doing, and try to have an impact in that, and hold leadership accountable to having strategy. I'd be shocked if you don't have one, quite frankly, because that's what the next generation of talent that's coming into organizations cares about.
Right.
And from a property operations perspective, there's entry-level stuff. Like BOMA Best is a phenomenal program. It's not expensive, and it's not too labor-intensive to get doing, and it provides a really good roadmap for keeping you accountable to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Then you move up the value chain. Like LEED is brutal, and it's expensive, but it's also worth doing. There's lots of marketing power behind that. So I think you move up the kind of complexity, cost, and value chain. But doing something like BOMA Best, and not even, if you don't want to apply, don't apply, but take the playbook associated with that and start kind of checking off the boxes.
And I'm going to suggest too, if we take a look at specifically the 4 bank towers that we have in the downtown core, 10 to 12,000 building occupants. It's a small city of 50, 60,000 people at the corner of King and Bay. The underground path system, the numbers of people that swim up and down stream like salmon over the course of a day, those numbers exceed what Disney World would do on an annual basis. So I'm a tenant in a bank tower, Scott. I pay a lot of rent. I'm very comfortable with my address. Yep. I'm very comfortable giving you the big check for my rent. I'm going to be outspoken when it comes to sustainability as a tenant. And what are you seeing, and what's your experience with respect to your tenants wanting to be part of the process and you folks having to listen to that?
Yeah, if I think about the transformation that's gone on, call it the past 10, 15 years, the focus around the impact on climate, the focus around the impact on the commercial real estate on climate is big. And our tenants, the occupiers in the building, they want to align where they have their corporate space, where their employees are, with their corporate responsibility program. So therefore, we have to be aligned. If we're not aligned, if they don't feel we're doing enough or engaging the right programs, and I would argue that sustainability today, it's a good bucket, but it's actually much broader. So we've been focused on energy, we've been focused on water. Now we're focused on inclusion, accessibility, multi-faith. So how do we do that in that corporate responsibility umbrella? Moreover, how do we drive that at the property? Because each region has its own levers that the properties have to pull. And then how do we engage all of our stakeholders? So all the people that are contributing to the success of that property, whether it's third-party contractors, whether it's vendors that are supplying products, how are you capturing that information and sharing to the clients what you're doing and your year-over-year successes? And that's important to them. I think as we hear now more and more about the global impact that we're having, people are uber focused on what is it you're doing and the disclosure of information. We used to be able to hide behind, well, we'll tell you how you're doing. That's not good enough. And even our shareholders, institutional investors, they also want to know that they're investing in a socially responsible company, not just for profits anymore.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. So in the world today, particularly in the Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, where the occupiers in our office space and all other spaces for that matter, they're looking for talent. They're hiring employees, and employees are demanding that the company they work for, the employer they work for, actually has corporate responsibility. So they're saying, well, if I'm going to come and work for you, what are you doing about it? And so then those employers are looking at the landlords and saying, hey, you need to help me out with this because everything that's going on in the building does impact my ability to actually attract talent to my group. And so this has actually been a driver of value. 15 years ago, who would have thought sustainability, the word itself, what it was, the definition of, was actually going to drive value to the point where it is no longer a differentiator. It's actually table stakes. You have to be doing it, and you have to be doing it in a way that actually reaches the individual occupant now. It's not just the tenant or the person who's paying the rent. So that's been a big evolution for all of us, whether you're an owner manager, whether you're a landlord, or whether you're a third party. We're paying attention to it because that is actually, at the end of the day, we have to find value for our stakeholders, and that includes the tenants and the occupants. So that's where it's been driven from.
And just to support that, it's not just about simple payback anymore. It is about reputation. It is about how do you retain those clients. Before it was, we're going to change those light bulbs because it's 3-year payback. Today, we're
Right.
well beyond that.
Well, and the whole issue around sustainability has gone from there was a stigma. What we would have called 10 years ago, 12 years ago, greenwashing, has become a key performance indicator for all of your organizations, right? And in the absence of a mission or a vision or some strategy around sustainability, perception is you're not doing enough, right? I want to
And I think just to back up,
Yeah, please.
similar to what Neil talked about, is the notion of GRESB in BOMA Best. It's that documentation and audit process
Right.
that you can actually substantiate what you're actually doing versus, look, this is what we're trying to achieve, but what are we actually doing? Because that's what people are looking for. They're not just, to your point, it's not about greenwash. What is it? And what are you disclosing?
And if you can't substantiate and you can't prove, what's the perception? You're not doing it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Michael McCormick, I'm going to call on you to share with us your insight as it relates to best practices. Let's talk a little bit about innovation in your world. Sure. and how you've arrived at some of the changes and enhancements you've made as a group.
Sure, thank you. So for us, when I look at innovation, I think it starts with the people. It starts with the team. There's a lot of talk about diversity, and I look at balancing diversity of backgrounds, diversity of perspectives, diversity of different experiences with common values. We have common values of honesty, trust, taking care of each other. And if you put those two together, and when you interview, when you hire, when you build a team, you look to build a team that comprises of that, those are your building blocks. Then in the organization has to have the environment and the structure where innovation is possible. Sometimes we think of being innovative and we think of chaos. It's just like go in a room and just brainstorm and throw it all out there. Beyond it though, if you look at really true, good innovators, they do have some structure. They do have some processes that protects the employees, protects the organization, it protects clients, it protects the financial health of the organization. But you still have got that room within the structure where you encourage different ideas, you encourage challenging. And one thing that I think we've seen a lot of recently is people talking about what they feel. I feel this, I feel that. What I try to do is to challenge, take what you feel and reposition that, what do you know? So if you feel something, do you have data? Do you have some evidence? Can you back it up with what you know? And what you know, that's where the data comes in to start to shift your perspective. Maybe you're going to learn, maybe you're going to see something that you hadn't already thought of. And when you encourage people to do that, you encourage them to challenge the norm, they can start to come up with some pretty interesting things. But it also takes leaders who are independently strong, who can be challenged, who can be told, what boss or a manager, that's a good idea, but actually there's a better one, and that is, I think, very, very, it's a challenge for many leaders to overcome, to realize sometimes you're wrong, and to invite that challenging, to invite the skepticism that as your team challenges with data and you talk through things, you're going to come up with better ideas. And I think one of the things that I see some of these conferences, we talk about massive change. There's going to be robots that are going to do everything and take over the world. Perhaps, but most innovation is small. It's a series of incremental changes, a series of incremental things in the way that we do business that really, when added up, cumulatively combined, drive a new ways of doing things. It may not seem like a big change at the time, but when we look back, we say, wow, look at where we started and look at where we have come. So it's that trying to encourage the team, challenge ideas, challenge the preconceived notions. Why are we doing things? Can we do them better? Being open to that, and then trying to take that feedback loop that's been talked about and try to use that to really drive innovation, drive new things going forward. And when ideas come out, when new ideas come out, celebrate them, say thank you, publicly acknowledge them, and reinforce that which has been done, and the innovation loop starts to take off.
So, Michael, this is on, notionally it's on innovation, but I'm going to touch on sustainability because I read very, very recently about some innovations at Canderel as it relates to sustainability. And I was wondering if you could comment. I mean, that was your team. And you approached it very much from the standpoint of team. It was not going to be done in isolation. It was not going to be an edict. So how significant was it for you to involve others, find a role for them to be involved, and maybe comment a little bit about the collaboration?
Sure. It really comes from the ground up. You can't mandate sustainability and have people buy in. They have to want to. It's part of the selection. It's part of the screening. It's part of the talking. To Allan's point about why, what's the belief? Try to tap into that. How are people thinking? Where is that coming from? And if you can tap into that, get the broader team buy-in. That's how you really drive the change. And we've done a few different things with accessibility in Calgary. The Rick Hansen award there. We're doing different things, be it LEED or be it BOMA Best. We're doing bees. Bees are interesting, but there's one interesting thing with the bees. There are a few companies that do bees. They all came and they presented in that. One of the companies, and I won't say who, but very slick.
What does it rhyme with?
It's really funny, honey. It's very slick, great marketing, great presentation. But there was another provider that came that were basically true bee farmers. It's what's it, apiary, I think is the word. They were like true bee enthusiasts. No polished marketing and stuff, but they knew bees, they knew flowers, and the team bought into the latter group. So the building did not necessarily get all of the marketing splash, but the team was bought in, the honey is being produced, the right thing is being done, and and through not taking that perhaps flashy step first, when we start to produce the honey and we give it to the partners, and then we use it in baking on site, and we communicate the message to the tenants, it will ultimately, in the long run, drive, I believe, a different perception. It'll drive out the right perception. It just took a little longer to get there, but it's a better program, I believe. This is quite interesting to watch that come to fruition and to see that going on live at that particular property.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to call on you, Neil, if you can comment a little bit as it relates to innovation. Best practices, take a look at services, call it quadrille or other mandates. Let's just call it what it is, Neil.
I'll make it up. That's what innovation is. You make it up. So innovation's not, I think we're all talking about innovation a lot. And that's the right thing to do. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of disruptions, blah, 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 blah. But innovation doesn't have to be technology oriented. Innovation can be best practices. It can be, how can we do something better, right? You see something broken in your organization, identify it and try to fix it, right? And so in my mind, innovation comes from the bottom up. The ideas come from the people that are experiencing the challenges. Create a solution. Don't just complain about it. Figure out the solution, make the recommendation, filter it up through the organization. The leadership can provide structure and then scale it to an organization. So the Bs, that's a great story. I'm sure you'll blow that out across your organization to do it better. But it's come foundationally from the teams in the field that come up with these ideas. So embrace, to Allan's point, start with the why, create a trusting environment, innovation will come, and then leadership's got to support it, and it becomes a circle. And technology is going to be a part of all that, but it's really not technology-led. It's creativity more than anything.
Right. And the other aspect too, when you're talking about innovation, sustainability, all of these topics as it relates to best practices, and this is really for maybe a management company that is more entrepreneurial and not one of the larger Canadian real estate giants. Best practices become your differentiator. They become the way you define yourself. And it says something about the organization. And then as an organization, you're able to own it. And it becomes part of your own story when you're introducing yourself and your organization to the marketplace. So when someone says, who do you work for and what's your differentiator or why would I do business with you? It becomes very comfortable for them to talk about the best practices. And it says something about the organization. And really the employees become very proud to be part of that.
Well, so just to add to that, going from an organization that's got resources and structure and the platform to do great things to a different type of organization, all the more so we're going to have to embrace ground up innovation. And we don't have the resources at Davison to have a senior vice president of sustainability or to have a senior vice president of customer experience, or to have, these things won't happen. Maybe someday, we'll see, but it's going to come from the ground up, and then we can tell the story and then build from there, and that's the best practices. And it's just big company, small company, I think it should all work the same, but for the smaller companies in particular, that's the only way it's going to happen.
Right. Perfect.
And actually, if I could just add to what Neil said, I think if you look at innovation and the way we've been trying to embrace it, certainly across Canada and North America, we find the smaller assets that have a closer team are the ones that are the innovators. They're the ones that are coming up with great ideas that we have been actually introducing in some of our larger assets. So there seems to be a little more, where their dynamics are there and the folks are kind of embracing each other's ideas and building on them, that's where you start to get the innovation.
Because it's not somebody else's job.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like your
They
team,
make
and
it
you figure it
happen.
out.
That's right.
So what's interesting, and so now I'm going to flip back to the larger Canadian real estate giants and the 4 bank towers, and I'm always reminded of, the Canadian property management industry contracts out more than any other industry, period. You will not think of another industry that contracts out more than property management. So then you peel back the layers on that. We also probably purchase, use, deploy, and then landfill or treat more chemicals than a lot of other industries. So that, in conjunction with what's changed globally over the last 10 to 15 years and how that's impacted management companies in terms of their focus and their readiness, and then you throw in mitigating circumstances like 4 big bank towers with 60,000 people at the corner of King and Bay. So share with us, some of the things that you've focused on in some of those environments.
So, with Colliers and our footprint being pretty much across the country and throughout the world, we tried to do, and I'll give you key learnings for us. You try and do a one-stop sort of thing that works for everybody. It doesn't work. We've discovered, and the hard way, that you have to actually go down to the ground level and the asset level and do your planning from there up. And it has to involve the stakeholders and the people that actually are running those buildings. So much so that we've actually now, we actually work with our vendors and our suppliers as part of our emergency response planning. They're a vital part of our delivery. They're a vital part of how we cope with any crisis situation or emergency response. So the planning now happens at the base level all the time. And it's not just a check mark. It always has to be completely changed and looked at constantly. So the more you engage with the actual team on the ground who actually has to deal with any kind of emergency response, they live and breathe that plan. And so if there's any changes or nuances, or there's a change in a supplier, or a change in an employee or a contact, or whoever's on that business continuity plan that comes in after the emergency response, they take care of it. They own it, and they make sure that it's always up to date. That's the future for us. That's where we're headed right now. How we got to this place, though, is we started looking at risk mitigation in a different way. I think Colliers being a very large real estate company, we have lots of risk managers and directors and VPs of insurance and risk, and they have a tendency to tell you what you can't do, and that's okay, because we have to find solutions around those parameters. The thing is, though, is that our people, what we focus on is actually training our people on having risk awareness themselves, being able to identify risk at their level and at their building and all those different things. This actually creates the environment where they can actually come up with solutions that will help our plan be better and do those things. Risk to persons and property, of course, are important to identify, but we talk about reputational risk. I think we all know that this is a litigious society at times, and you have to be aware of what those reputational risks are at any time. And of course, there's financial risk that goes along with that. But reputational risk, particularly for a third-party manager like us, we don't own any of the assets that we manage. We are strictly third party, so our people and our reputation is vital for us to continue being able to do what we do. So risk mitigation and risk identification has become one of the pillars for our teams to understand, and we invite solutions and ideas through that. There's a couple of 2 key takeaways I'd like you to, as you look at your own emergency plans and your own business continuity, there's 2 things to focus on. Communicate well and relatively often. You can't over communicate in situations like that. We like to have positive touch points with our tenants and our occupants, but when there's actually something happening in the building, the more information you're sharing, the more transparent that you with information you can be, and that's up and down the stakeholders. It's not just the tenants and occupants, it's also to the investors and the owners. And I suggest you divvy up that task, because the people on the ground who are dealing with the crisis shouldn't be reporting up the chain totally, because they're dealing with the thing at hand. The second thing is be a human being. Empathize with the folks that you're communicating with, take their perspective and communicate in that way. You'll get a lot more out of it in terms of cooperation, understanding. Those things are important because, yeah, some people tell you, well, why do I have to evacuate the building? It's 40 below outside. Well, you could die. But I don't want that to happen because I care about you. So you're gonna communicate in the right way, and you take their perspective. I empathize. I know it's really cold. We're gonna get some blankets. Like you'll actually see that when you put yourself in those people's position, you come up with other ideas that actually can help that situation. Like having blankets, like having a place where they can go. Working with your other landlords and other property managers. Hey, I need a spot to. It's really cold outside. Can we bring some evacuees into your building while we figure out what we're going to do? Those little things make emergency response plans more human. And I think if you look at it that way, you'll actually never want to go through a crisis, but it'll help get through it with your team.
And there's stigma damage. So you work for Colliers, and you've got some trophy assets that are impacted. You can't buy extra insurance and say, I'm not going to develop any programs because I got extra insurance. There's going to be stigma damage, and that's going to be difficult for the companies to put value on perception or stigma damage. And I just want to have Michael join us on this and talk a little bit, if you could, from your perspective on mitigation and training and preparedness.
I think that's so important that before I do, I'm going to just build on that. We manage buildings 365 days per year after year. What people remember about the property manager isn't the sum of 365 days. It's generally certain snapshots. It's the day that there was a crisis and the property manager responded and the tenants were like, wow. Or it's the day when the property manager responded in a way that tenants didn't expect, and then it's like, do you remember that time when? And so it's how you think about this. It happens so infrequently, but it defines the reputation over such a long period of time. I think that's why it's a hard thing to manage, frequency with the magnitude of the impact. But when I think about frequency, and I think if you think of what is risk, and I go back to from a financial perspective, from a mathematical perspective, risk is deviation from the norm. It's the probability of various outcomes that are unknown and that deviate from what you expect. How you partly prepare for that, building on the team and the people side of it that has been talked about. We talked about diverse background, but also when you're hiring, when you're bringing people on, when you're developing that team, one thing that I really like to look for is people who have overcome adversity in their lives. Some adversity that's in your background, how you responded to that, how you address that, that's going to shape your character, shape your formative thinking. If we take the customer service example there, a customer service person didn't just do the certificate and wow, they're great. There's some formula, there's some a formative background, some formative experience, how that person thinks, whether they're calm, how do they react. So that kind of builds the environment. They've got the support from the management team. And then the one thing very practically that I've seen is that there's a lot of different companies will purport to do these tabletop exercises. It sounds really good, we're going to get this big binder and it's going to lay out all the possible scenarios, and we're going to sit in the boardroom at 10 a.m. on Tuesday and flip through it, and you feel good, but it's a false sense of security because those crises rarely happen at 10 a.m. on a beautiful sunny day. They happen after hours, weekends, sometime when it's not perfect. So just having the binder there on the shelf isn't enough. It's got to be a muscle, a memory. It's got to be something innate. Just like an athlete trains for a particular move, you have to practice these things, physically get up, walk around, do it. And we had a great example in one of our buildings. The fire ring around the building cracked, and water was coming up, and the building operator, in theory, knew to turn off the valve. Practically, he was not as trained as we would like, and the water kept flowing. So we moved at that building from the tabletop training to very practical training. And I went in some months later at midnight, and I went into the central utility plant, banged on the door, walked in, and I said to the gentleman, pipe has burst, water's flowing, what do you do now? And he fell off his chair at first, like, what's going on? When he recovered rather quickly, because we had practiced it, his muscle memory took over. The shock of seeing the VP at midnight there at his building faded real fast, and he said, okay, valve, call, do this, do this, do this. And it took over, and I said, that's what we want to get to, that people don't just theoretically know about this, but they practically will do it, they will implement it. And that, I think, that's kind of a key part of being prepared. And then when the crises do happen, there are principles of reaction. The principles take over, the practice takes over, and then once things are stabilized, you shift from the crisis to the business continuity. That's where the guides and the manuals can lay out a more structured approach. And the last thing that I have found is that these things need to be clear and memorable. If you think of a fire warden training, we've all got fire warden training periodically. Do the fire wardens, do they internally know everything that's taught in that? Is it really get it in their soul? Or do you need something like a saying, a rhyme, a song? It sounds cheesy, but they'll remember that song. And when the crisis comes, boom, oh yeah, I now know what to do. And so trying to follow with different practical things there to get training, to get thinking, and to get principles of reaction in place that you're prepared for the emergencies and you mitigate the risk.
You've touched on a couple of things there, Michael, and it sort of dovetails into something Allan has shared. And we talk about the obligation on the part of the management company throughout the course of the year to provide training, prescribe different levels of training. Your fire alarm system, panels, communications, deployments of your plan and whatnot. And BOMA did a study going back, it probably was about 15 years ago. And I'm sharing this because of your involvement, with BOMA and what you're doing organizationally. They had worked in conjunction with a group called the APA, which is the American Psychiatric Association. One of the most significant contributing factors was personality and how your building occupants and their behavior and how they respond. So they may have pre-existing health conditions, they may be psychosomatic, and may be psychological. Have you been in an elevator with someone who has a phobia about confined space? What gets said from your building operations through the enunciator panel and what the individual entrapped hears are two different things. So you need to be relentless on your training. It's prescribed quarterly, monthly, annually, and at the end of the day, you're still going to have tenants who don't want to participate.
An interesting story of a building. I was a general manager at the time, a downtown office building, and you do your regular fire drills. Well, for some reason, my building manager did not inform the tenants that we were doing a fire drill. So the fire fire drill went on, but everybody thought there was a real fire. And this is where you actually see people react to something that they think is really happening. So they do has anyone seen that Seinfeld episode where George Costanza knocks over everybody to get out of the fire? So there's people who do a George Costanza and knock over the people to get out of the building. One of the biggest tenants in the building I manage, and I won't name but it was a large financial institution.
What does it rhyme with?
Huh? It's an American company. There was a person who actually had ambulatory care. He was in a cast, and he was in a broken leg. And all our fire drills, with all the fire wardens, you're supposed to stay in place and wait for the fire department to come and get you. Your buddy is supposed to stay with you. Well, the buddy took off and left the guy to burn, basically. So this training, as much as you do it, you start recognizing that you're going to find gaps. And I don't suggest you go and just pull the fire alarm and see what happens, but the reality is that recognize that even as much testing as you do, as much training as you do, there's always, to Michael's point, there are going to be people who never paid attention to it before, or they thought, yeah, check the box. The box checkers are actually the most dangerous because they think they're prepared. And the ones who are engaged and understand that this actually could save a life will really make the difference in those situations. So I won't name the financial institution. So.
Well, similar story when I managed First Canadian. We had a really, really large anchor tenant, and it's the Bank of Montreal building. And they would complain, and so we would advertise we're doing drills. And the day of the drill, they would call and complain and say, "Can you turn off the speakers? We're in the middle of a meeting." So this went on for a period of time, and it was really frustrating. You had some tenants that took it very seriously, and others didn't want to participate. So we decided to call the fire department, and we said, "Listen, we would love it if you just came down to observe, and we want you to hang out on this particular floor and observe." And all it takes is for the fire department to issue a notice of violation to your tenant for not participating, and they get the message, right? So now I wanted to start back here with Neil, and really this was, we talked a little bit about the significance of team and collaboration, leadership. So when you reflect on the best practices that you've been involved with, and the success of those best practices, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the non-financial return on investment for the brand, for your organization, maybe for you personally, maybe for your team, maybe for the tenant community and for your organization.
Non-financial?
Yeah, perception, marketing. What's the perception of your organization with respect to how cutting edge, leading edge you've been with best practices? And does that matter to your organization?
Well, I think it matters. It matters to every organization. I think there is an element of non-financial, but I think it all ultimately comes back to financial, right? Brand value, there's a return on that, a financial return. So, best practices guide our behaviors, and you have to have them, you have to develop them, and then you have to recreate them. And it's constant, back to innovation, right? Like it's go dust off the best practice from 10 years ago, because it hasn't been changed, and it's not the greatest best practice anymore, right? The world continues to evolve, and if we don't continually reinvent those best practices, that's why I quite honestly, I hate the word best practice, because what's best for me is completely different than what's best for Scott. It's leading practices, it's something other than best. I quite frankly haven't come up with the name, but that's because, so we always default back to best practices, but it is quite frankly a misleading term, because there's no such thing as best. It might be the best at the particular moment, but tomorrow it's different. So
is that going to be your first project at Avis and Young? And the use of the word best?
Practice.
I don't have an alternate word, so I can't say get rid of the word. So I think there's a huge return on this stuff.
Sure.
And it is somewhat difficult to quantify, but teams, without the structure, without the guidance, it's sort of anarchy. So.
And there's a balance of the cost of not doing these versus the cost of, so not doing them and something happens. Stigma, perception, company goes bankrupt, versus the cost of investing into leading practices. or better practices, or best practices. Michael, from a Manulife financial perspective, sort of ROI on brand with respect to these issues we've been discussing.
I think what we're trying to achieve, and it's not easy, is most landlords, and I know it's pretty traditional, that they don't want to kind of go within the lease lines of the of the tenants. They typically offer services and amenities that are outside of that box. But we're finding more and more that our practices, whatever they are, that we're able to achieve with our in-house customer, we're putting them out to our other tenants and suggesting ideas on how they could be more efficient, how they could get more productivity out of their employees. So it's not necessarily a financial gain for us. Now it could be because it's more tenant retention, and that translates into dollars and cents. But we're finding that there are some pretty innovative ways that we've been trying to achieve get more productivity out of our team members, and we're kind of sharing that with our tenants. So it's now about, and not now, I know it's been happening, but I think we need to be more and more mindful of the fact that there's a tenant that's got a business that's going on within those four walls. And we need to understand what that is and see how we can help them achieve their goals. And that also results in an ROI that may not necessarily be dollars and cents, but it certainly is an investment in the relationship with that tenant.
Scott? Again, the same question?
Yeah, we've talked about it. Each of us have a brand. There's a brand of an expectation when you're leasing space for that brand, but it's really about collaborating. I don't, the notion anymore that that's not my job, that's Scott's job, and his team's going to tell me how to innovate, how to do this. I think we've talked about it's really got to come from the ground up as to what's going on, how they can serve those clients' needs in that building, and then how can we share that. But it's not just the operating engineers or the GM's idea. It really has to be collaborative, and that also involves the tenants. Whether that's through advisory council, of what you're doing with sustainability, of what, how can we improve amenities, frictionless environments, all those buzzwords that we're talking about. But it doesn't happen on its own, and it's not one person's job.
People, yeah, we're in the service business first and foremost. We just happen to do that with some bricks and mortar and some things that we do in there. But we're in the service business, and if we truly care about our staff, we care about our tenants, we want them to succeed, and we want the owners and the investors in our buildings to succeed, why wouldn't we try to do the best job possible, the most innovative job possible, take care of things? It just makes common sense. And in a broader picture, it's part of our civil society, how we take care of each other, how we try to do the best job possible. That makes our society work. So from that lens, why not?
So I talked about Colliers, and we have this purpose or why. I didn't actually tell you what it was. Our why is imagine new possibilities. And it's not something we put on a brochure. It's not I'm telling you guys just so you understand what our perspective is. How we prove that why exists, because it's just words. How you prove is how you act and behave and communicate with others, whether it be with your own team members, whether it be with your clients, whether it be your tenants, occupants, service providers, because we all hire service providers. That actually has what I call that, and didn't make this up, but it's a virtuous cycle, right? Because we're trying to achieve the service aspect that we're trying to deliver, and we have a lot of stakeholders. For us, it's not just the tenants and the occupants, it's also the investors and the clients. So we have multiple stakeholders, and we believe as we continue to want to attract, the best people to our organization, we want to be a destination employer because they're going to deliver those best ideas. for lack of a better word, Neil, those better ideas, but come up with new ones to continue to advance. I love the way you said it. It's leading, it's always changing. We live and work in a dynamic industry that is actually moving faster than we've ever seen before. So we need to be able to be open to that, be humble about it, and understand that this virtuous cycle it's going to impact return on investment. That is talking about financial, but it comes through that non-financial return on investment, which comes from the people and the team together, creating leaders, having leadership grow, and people. I never get angry when someone moves up is in my organization and has excelled in their job and goes and joins another organization for a better role. I get upset a little bit because they're leaving, but at the same time, they've moved on to something bigger and better. And that's a reputation that people will understand. So then it actually helps with our organization to understand that too and take care of that. Taking care of the people, they'll take care of the rest. Pretty simple.
Perfect. I want to say thank you to the panel. Your expertise, your insight, your innovations, your levels of excellence, the sharing today, I think is tremendous. I want to thank the participants for joining us today. I sort of view the Canadian property management industry, specifically Toronto, it's the smallest biggest or the biggest smallest industry. You figure out what that means. When you come to these sessions, prepare to network, prepare to share business cards, introduce yourself to others in the group, in the panelists, and people resurface and they pop up every 5, 10, 15 years in this industry. You never know who you're going to be working with next. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.